step over here, I think, so I'm not standing in the slide. That's all right with you guys, at least. I think it'll be better.
That's better for both
Yeah,
you and
definitely. Get that working out. Also, I brought some Ubuntu pins, or buttons, I guess, in case anyone wants any. Don't stick your hand right in and grab them, because I did that and it hurt. So that was bad. Alright, so I'm going to be talking about how to customize your Ubuntu desktop. Some basic customizations you can do. As well as I'm going to get into some of the other versions of Ubuntu that aren't necessarily the main desktop interfaces, as well as some basic things you can do to enhance your productivity utilizing the Ubuntu desktop. Who am I? I am Philip Ballew. I'm from California originally. I am 23. Some hobbies are bike riding, dancing badly, tripping, who doesn't work well with the bike riding, and using sarcasm at the wrong time. Something that I need to work on. However, before we get into the talk, why customize your desktop, would I say? So many people might install Ubuntu, Debian, Fedora, Red Hat, whatever the heck they want to install, and start going and just use whatever they provide you, which is great because the majority of free operating systems are already made so well that the system is already built for something. However, what I think that truly free software is about owning your product, because instead of actually like signing up to a EULA or anything where you are essentially renting the product and they have the rights to it, with free software you own the product. And so when you customize, you make that product into your own, and that's something that we should not take for granted today. So a little bit about the history of Ubuntu Unity, Unity being the name of the default desktop interface. It originally started as the Netbook edition for Ubuntu 10.10, back when netbooks were a thing. I mean, I guess those are still a thing possibly, but not as much. What's interesting about this desktop interface is, unlike the majority of other Linux desktop interfaces, this already uses existing applications from GNOME, to where this is essentially you could almost call it a spin-off of GNOME, to unlike, say, KDE, LXDE, XFCE having their own application set. This allows you to use GNOME applications, or any other applications, KDE, XFCE, you can install the backends, and still utilizing the interface that they provide. Now this is an older version of the interface from 10.10, which was, I want to say 5 years ago, maybe 6 at this point. But what's interesting, even in this version, all the way up to the new version, which I'll show right here, the entire point is to open the screen up for the user. So what it strives to do is to almost get the desktop out of your way. So instead of actually interacting with the desktop, you interact with the software instead. Which I think is where we're heading with technology today. In some ways, the operating system is becoming irrelevant to how you use your computer. I mean, certainly when we talk about free software, the operating system we have is crucial to us as we want to use something that is free, open source, and protects us as users. But that being said, the way we interact with it is almost that if you see the operating system or notice you're using an operating system, the operating system is not functioning properly anymore. So some of the terminology here, we have the title, we have what here is called number 4, which is the launcher, as well as we have the launcher icons. That's Firefox. If you don't know what Firefox is, that's unfortunate. Look back behind you at the awesome table. Over there we have the dash over there, which is where you can launch additional applications that aren't your default application or your preferred application, the one you normally use, which you can throw onto the launcher. So for instance, I might use my terminal and my internet browser every single day, but I only open up LibreOffice once a month. So I wouldn't want to necessarily keep that on the launcher. I would want to throw that onto the side, or throw that onto the dash and open it up, so it's not getting in my way. One thing that's interesting about Unity is it, in some ways, it's built to where you don't have to let your hands get away from the keyboard. Sure, you can certainly use it as an interface where you're constantly playing around with your mouse, doing all that sort of stuff, but as well it's built with a lot of keyboard shortcuts. So what you can do, you can hold down the super key, as we call it, the key with the Windows icon. I have mine with a little Ubuntu sticker covered up, which is kind of cool, I think. But you hold that down and it, hold up one second, on the desktop, and it brings up, hold up one second, here we go. It brings up the keyboard shortcuts, and you can see that if you want to memorize all of these, that would be excellent fun for you. Or you can just hold down the button when you ever have a question. I mean, it has some basic things that it does that other applications do. Like, I mean, you can use Alt-Tab and switch between things. So like I can hit Alt-Tab and pop up, scroll between what I want to do. And for instance, if I have multiple applications, if I have multiple windows with Firefox open, like here, let's see, what is it? New window, Alt-Tab. And then I can hold down, continue to hold down, and then I can choose between them. I mean, most operating systems have a similar feature to this. But with this, one of the main reasons you would go back to your mouse is to switch applications. But, I mean, if we're going to be true Linux users, why would we want to use a mouse in the first place? Maybe. But I also like to think that Linux is open to anybody of any technical skill. So don't hold me against that.
When you have several Firefox windows open,
Yes.
and you move the mouse to the one who is behind, can you make it auto-raise? How do you make it auto-raise to go in the foreground?
What was that?
How do you make it auto-raise so that it goes in the foreground automatically without you having to click anything? You just put it on the window and the
Yes.
window goes in front.
Do you want to know how you can designate which window will open up first? You mean?
No, if you have, say you have two windows
Yes.
in Firefox,
Yes.
and the one is in front and the other one is, you
In
can
the
see
back.
the edge
Yeah.
of it in the back. And you just push the mouse so it goes to the second one, the one in the back.
Yes.
How do you make it auto-raise so that it goes into the foreground just by putting the mouse there without clicking?
By default, it's going to open up the most previous window that you used as well. And are you saying how can I use the mouse to switch back and forth? So like,
How do you make the mouse? You just put the mouse there and the
You
window
put the
goes
mouse-
into the foreground without clicking anything.
I mean, you can put the mouse. I would use my arrow key though.
Yeah.
So for instance, I can use my arrow key to switch up, switch over. You know, so if I have multiple file instances and I want to go to my home versus my desktop in Nautilus, for instance, I would hit the arrow key and go back and forth. But yes, I can also use the mouse as well, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, but
I'm trying to figure out exactly what you're
it's
asking.
not about the
Without
mouse. It's not
clicking.
about the mouse.
Without
It's
clicking, you would hit enter.
how do you make it automatically activate the window you point to without clicking anything?
Without clicking anything. I believe it once you highlight it.
Yeah.
Focus follows mouse, basically.
Yeah. Once you actually highlight it, if you let it go and let Control Alt Tab, then it's going to open back up to that window. If that's what you're asking. So I would scroll up here, and if I release, it opens up that one. But if I scroll down to right here, and then I release onto this one, then it opens up that version. So, yeah, ultimately, I mean, for sure you could just go with your mouse though, but either or. All right. So the easiest way to change things, obviously, in Ubuntu, if you want to do some basic customizations, is the already included system settings, which provides the basic customizations for the user. So let me go and show you what that does. It's pretty basic, but I mean, it does some things that the average person might want to do before they get into serious scripting or anything. I mean, you can set up two-finger scrolling, tap to click. You can set up your privacy accounts. You know, you can work with suspend. You can change your keyboard settings, so if you want to use like Dvorak and things like that, which can be interesting. We also have support for Wacom tablets for artists. If you're interested in being an artist, that's the cool thing. However, because normally included with operating systems, default system customizations, sometimes don't allow as much customization as people want. One thing, here, let me scroll back up to, one thing that I always recommend is changing the default applications as well as customizing and adding more things yourself. So one thing that I recommend for basic customizations is to just set up more virtual desktops, because Ubuntu has no virtual desktops installed by default, and so you would just go into your system settings, appearance, and enable workspaces. But what's interesting and a cool little customization I found last week was a PPA you can add. How many of you know what a PPA is? Okay, a PPA is essentially adding your own line to your sources.d list that will add your own repository line that you can then install anything through apt-get, allowing you to install an application without having to manually download an application that's not in the default sources and compile, or install a dev and use dpackage to install it. And in many ways, it eliminates the risk of installing unauthorized applications. There's still risk from installing something that's not in the default repositories, but if it's through a PPA, it's on Launchpad, which is the site that Ubuntu hosts their code as well. And it's more often than not verified, as well as you can easily look at the code before you download it, if you're into that. Secondly, if you're still wanting to do just some basic things, you can switch up some default applications. If you listen to music, you know, like to dance or whatever, Banshee is pretty cool, that's what I use, or Clementine, which is cool, or Google's music player, which is interesting. I can show you that later if you're a Google fanatic. I'm not myself, but a lot of people are for some reason. Office suites, because one thing that's, LibreOffice provides a lot of functionality for people, but if you haven't noticed, it can be kind of bloated. So when you open it up, 20 minutes later when it loads and opens, then you finally get to go. But one of my favorite things to do with LibreOffice is I can put a little timer there and count how long it'll have to open up till it just crashes on me. But no, you can use Calligra, which is KOffice, essentially from KDE after it's been formatted, or Abbey Word, which is the default for Ubuntu, which is lighter and a lot simpler. Trying to all you need to do is a word processor. Terminals. How many of you guys use terminals? I hope you all raise your. All right, I was really sad if no one. I always recommend trying out different terminals because the default one will provide the functionality, but there's extra things you can add. I use Terminator myself. How many of you guys have ever used that? All right, cool. I'm going to demo that because why the hell not? So you can even scroll down here and open up with your mouse. As well, like I was saying, if you hold this down, you can notice that if you hold this down, you notice that all of these have numbers next to them. And so you can open up the application that way as well. So theoretically, you would actually never have to. Hold on one second. You don't need Firefox open. You can have that open either, unless you want to see when you're talking to your girlfriend. Then you can just open up that way. But what's interesting is, instead of having multiple tabs, which they provide, you could split horizontally or split vertically. So like I could run htop in one way. Well, I might be compiling something to see how my system is running while I'm compiling. As well, then I'm running that. So instead of having to, switch between tabs, I can bring the entire system to me, which is probably why I enjoyed this myself. And I should really reboot my laptop sooner or later. But that's just something that I enjoy myself. But I think ultimately what's important is you being able to make the computer your own. Because that is what free software is having the ownership of the software. So after that, you'd want to do, I was talking about using different text editors. I'm not really sure why we need to talk about different text editors, since we all know that VI is the best text editor in the world. But another cool one is, Emacs, I guess. I'm just kidding, by the way. But Sublime is interesting. That's a new one a lot of people use. So if you're doing a lot of web development, I've used that a few times. Kwrite is good. Yeah, so that's. There was once a Linux users group in San Francisco that broke out into a chair fight over text editors. That's a true fact. And the Linux users group meeting had to end shortly that day, unfortunately. I guess it's not our fault the Emacs people were jealous. I kid. Also, you can switch up file browsers if you aren't really a terminal person. How many of you ever used Midnight Commander? I threw that in there because I think Midnight Commander is kind of interesting. You know, if you want to look like you're from Tron or something. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. What's interesting though is Midnight Commander. You can use your mouse inside the terminal with Midnight Commander, which you would open it up by typing MC, and then you can just, you know, view file, do all that sort of jazz. Exit out of it. So you can use it as a file browser from your terminal. So what's cool about that is instead of me, you know, I don't know why you would need to open up a file browser entirely, but some people prefer that, so you can actually load up, get that sorted out while you're in the terminal if you want to see something, not just by, you know, using like ls-taq-a or ls or anything like that. However, then you want to go and you want to manually change all of these default applications. So you can go into your system settings and go into defaults and you can change it for the majority of things, as well as though, since Ubuntu is on the backbone of Debian, you can just run sudo updates alternatives, taq all, or any other form of sudo updates alternatives, and check out the application that you need to use, and that would load the Debian program update alternatives, and then you would change by the association of all of that. And if you guys want any help with any of this, come up to me after the talk and I'll get you situated. Alright, now to the meat of this. We're going to go into some desktop customization apps beyond just the system settings, because those are not as exciting, unfortunately. What's interesting about desktop customization apps is instead of actually manually scripting everything, which is fun to do and I enjoy doing that myself, it's easier. And, of course, you can blame that instead of yourself when your computer breaks, because you need a scapegoat in life. Alright, so the first one is Unity Tweak. If you've never used Unity Tweak, I highly recommend trying it out. It's pretty fun. Unity Tweak tool. So that loads up and you can do some customizations. You can change the launcher, for instance. So I could set up the launcher to hide. Again, clearing out my screen to be even bigger than before, allowing you to have greater access to your applications, getting your desktop or getting your operating system almost out of the way entirely. I can also, though, if I'm really into this side launcher panel, I can go down here and just, you know, I mean, this is also important, for instance, because let's not forget there are people who may have maybe eyesight difficulties that it might be easier to increase the size for them. So perhaps it might be nice. Then if someone, I don't know, might be younger, have better eyesight, you can also make it smaller as well. But I believe I had it at 48 there. Then you can do some basic things. For all these, you can set it to 12-hour time or 24-hour time as well. You can include seconds if you're anal retentive. Pretty much some basic things. And this is easily installable from the Software Center or the terminal. Well, the Software Center itself actually, in Ubuntu, I wouldn't recommend using that. It's going to go away in about 6 months. We're switching to the regular GNOME default Software Center.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Which that has to do, I believe, that's related to the we're switching package managers because we're not going to be using debs after a while. We're using something called click packages, which is, I can go into that after the talk, but that's not related to desktop customization. You can go in here and change your theme to anything, I guess.
Radian.
Yeah, you can change it to radians. That's a pretty popular one. I'm more of an ambience person myself. Hot corners are also cool. So if you can set up to where this will work. So you can let's see. You can bring something up over here and just drag and drop. Years ago when Windows 7, I believe, came out, there was this Microsoft commercial that there was a man, oddly enough, he was standing in the shower with his laptop. I don't understand why, but it's Microsoft, so. And he talked about how he had this brilliant idea he submitted to Microsoft to where he said, it's brilliant. All I gotta do is I drag one app here, and then I drag another app over here, and it splits the apps to the side, on either side. And Microsoft portrayed this as their brand new idea. However, since KDE, we've had that in Linux for 10 years, I think. Yeah, so we are ahead in free software, thankfully. Let's see, more things. So that's actually window snapping, I should have mentioned that earlier. You can change the cursor if you want to. You can use large cursors as well. And you can do that kind of stuff, as well as you can click the restore default for when you break everything, which is always fun. Now, let's see. Another one is GNOME Tweak, which is a little bit different, but still has some of the same functionality. So you can change all of your themes, as well as you can easily go there and change your inputs for your mouse. So you can actually turn that off the location pointer, since I don't know why people do that entirely. You can change some of your power settings. Pretty basic things. I mean, for the average person who's going to show up to us for a free software conference like us, this would be pretty basic. However, what I like to do myself is I like to change my theme. And so what's interesting about changing your theme is Ubuntu does a really good job of providing you with several themes to choose from. However, you might think to yourself, well, maybe you're a creative person, maybe you're artsy, and you want to add your own. So you can actually install, unpack, and download themes. So, like there's PPAs you can install where you can add packages that will install a theme for you, which I could go into later. Or you could go to websites like ubuntuthemes.com and manually download and get a theme set up. So I'm going to demo how to do that here in just a second. Let's see. So due to the magic of technical talks, I already downloaded a couple compressed themes I'm going to show you here. Here, hold on. I have a better idea. I'm going to see if this will load and I can actually show you how to download them. Alright, let's see. Ultra flat, that sounds like fun. So you would click free, add to cart, because my favorite things. So then you enter in your email address. And first name, which is Philip. Last name is Ballew. And due to the magic of me not showing you my password, I'm going to unplug this right now. If you respect that, of course. have some pre-downloaded themes. Before it downloads, 'cause it's- Alright. And so these will get sent to your email, or you can download them from the website directly. And then I could just you could place them in any file, such as, desktop/files/themes, or you could paste them anywhere you want in your home folder. However, then what you want to do, you want to extract the file after you do that and move it to your theme folder. So let's see what I got here. So for instance, if you wanted to extract a file, say LibreDark 2.2.tar.gz or whatever, I'd run sudo JXZF. So that, ZX. If any of you guys have all of the tarball commands memorized, I have a lot of respect for you.
XVF.
Yeah, ZXVF.
Oh.
I do need the Z, correct, don't I?
Yeah, for gzips.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
J for bzip.
Mm-hmm. And so then you would just run that, and
Oh, I just
again, and then, but however, you want to eventually put the extracted file into user share themes. So what I always do, I just, what is it, capital C, US share themes. And so then you would extract something like that and run that command, which I ran before the talk actually. And so then you could just see. And then you can notice that if you run that, LibreDark is there. And I believe that then that has the most recent file highlighted, which is nice. And so then after you've run that, you would go up and an easy one is just open up and go to here, and it would already be selected because Unity Tweak pulls from user share themes. And so now you can make your computer look like it's from the 80s, or some sci-fi convention or something. Alright, enough of that. We don't really care about changing our themes anyway. We want to use the terminal and have fun. Alright, one thing that I like to do is do custom terminal launchers. So for instance, what I can do is you just make a desktop file. You've all made .desktop files before? Okay, so when making a .desktop file, you just you probably open up gedit, bi, nano, whatever you want to do, and you would set up something similar to this. What's important in here also to remember is terminal. You want to put true or false for the Boolean to let them know whether or not the application will open utilizing GTK or utilizing the terminal. So when you think about that, for instance, you can open up anything. If you want. Hold on just one second. And so for instance, with that, what you can do, you can edit applications. So you could, for instance, if you notice here how Firefox has open new window, open a new private window, you could log into the Firefox file itself and edit it to say, for instance, have additional options for you to run. You could have it open up you could have it open up directly to a specific website, if you understand that Firefox command, which is in, what did I do? Let's see. So then if you look at your user share applications, you can see a lot of the desktop files. Mm-hmm. And so then you would just open that up. Let's see. Let's see, is Firefox in here? I think Firefox is in here. Here, let's see. Let's look at one of these things. And so that, and so you can look here. You can look here that it's actually pretty well advanced. So if you notice in the previous slide that I had, it had options for name, and so they have it actually in every single language for Firefox. So when they run that, it runs one version for every single language. But then after you get through all of this stuff that is hard to pay attention unless you want to, you would go down to here where it says actions, and then you would select the new thing that you want to do, such as new window, new private window, or my email you could do. And then you would go down here and you would set up your own name, what should be open up my email. And then you would set up to where it runs the executable command, and then you put only shown unit, so you would put Firefox / open the command to open up the web page, which escapes me right off the top of my head. However, one thing that I'm going to show you very similar to that right now then is setting up custom terminal entries into your terminal. So what I like to do for adding custom entries into my terminal is when I'm working on servers, instead of opening up the terminal and SSHing in, I can add commands that just open up with Unity and instantly open up my terminals to the servers that I want. So just like here, how I can, just like here, how for instance I can open a new window, I could say, for instance, come to something like here, let's see, and I could have it open up a server. So if you're following along with my train of thought here, we could look at you could look here how in the actual file in and of itself you can set up something such as SSH into Philips home server, run a command like that. You could probably just set up a basic command without actually having all of the arguments inside, but to just open up an SSH right into your, I'm not going to do that now because that's on my local network, and open it up. And then if you set up key authentication, you don't even have to enter in your password technically, it'll just open right up. Which if you have a proper password onto your laptop in and of itself, that's a good thing. But if you don't have a secure password to open and log into your desktop, then don't do that, because that means your server could be unsecure. So you're going to want to pay attention when you do that. And so then you'll notice how then you can have something like this built right into it. So you could have SSH into Philips Home Server 1, SSH into Philips Home Server 2, SSH into Philips Home Server 3, or any title. You could SSH into Philips Badass Server, you know? I mean, pretty much anything that you want. It's pretty flexible, let's just put it that way.
Can you repeat that command? Yes, sorry.
The command here? Yeah, I mean, I think the command, can you see that? Can I, let's see. So, I mean, technically, you could probably just put SSH, you know, Philippa 1 and 2.1.6.1, whatever. But I throw the arguments in there since that disables a lot of the parameters that can cause any problems. And it's also important, I think, to put also shown in Unity as well, which seems to work out good. And if you notice as well here, what you want to do is you want to include the words desktop action inside of the brackets, and then the phrase home server, which corresponds back up here into actions, home server as well. Similar to desktop action new, because if you don't do that, then it won't pick it up and you just wasted your time. it's not something I'm gonna recommend. So you can follow that train of thought if you want and think, okay, so perhaps that's something that I'd be interested in. And so maybe instead of opening up the terminal, what you have to do is you have to open up certain files every day. So you may have a spreadsheet you're working on or anything like that. So I wrote this little basic, took a couple seconds, desktop file which will open up a song that you can play. And so you would And so you can just install or run a basic file which will load up and run the basic application that you want to do. So for instance, you can just, pretty simple if that follows on, let me pop that up there so you guys can see that originally. And so then what you could do, you could take the desktop, and after you write the desktop file, you would want to run a chmod tacx. Thus, utilizing, after you've done that, it just runs and adds the icon that you mentioned. And so then you can make it even simpler and you can drag this over here, throw that on there. So imagine this being, say, maybe you're an accountant and you have your spreadsheet there. And so instead of opening up LibreOffice, open the spreadsheet, you can just click on here and it'll load up. So then you could have something basic like this open every single day that you need to get working on your stuff and whatnot. Alright, we could sit here and dance all day, but let's not do that. That could be fun though. Break out a little dance session or something. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is indicators. How many of you know what indicators are for? Alright, so indicators are something interesting you can add up to the top panel if you haven't seen yet, that allow you to add little specifications. So like, it's like I have an alarm clock here so I don't do dumb things like not wake up and show up to a conference to a talk. You can add. So you can run and install multiple different things. And the way that you would want to figure out what they are is just run like an app cache search indicator you could run. So if you notice, here, let me actually, so yeah, so you would app cache search indicator, sudo apt-get install the indicator that you found in app cache search. And you can see the multiple number of indicators that you have available. And And so, like mute panel for the Make desktop, you know, I mean, I'm not gonna go through and list every single one here, that's for you guys to do at home when you're having lots of fun. But basic things like that, so you can install your, I had one a while ago that would list caps lock up there. Because for some reason Lenovo didn't think that my caps lock needed to have a light there to be indicated if it's on or off. Probably necessary, I'm not entirely sure about that yet. And that's something that I recommend myself. Alright. However, you might be thinking to yourself, Phil, you're full of shit, what are you doing here? And so, maybe you don't like Unity, maybe you don't like Ubuntu, but what I would recommend if Unity is not working for you, would be to add new desktop environments, or flavors as we like to call them. And so we have multiple flavors that you can install, as well as you can install multiple desktop environments. But I'll list the flavors here. We have Ubuntu, Ubuntu GNOME, which is essentially Ubuntu without Unity, just default GNOME, which is a very nice system. KDE, obviously, LXDE, XFCE. And all you gotta do is just, run something simple like for Ubuntu or Xubuntu, sudo apt-get install Ubuntu Desktop. I ran into someone who showed up to me asking me for help with their computer a couple months ago because they ran out of space on their hard drive. And they were triple booting multiple operating systems, one desktop for each one. So they had Kubuntu, Lubuntu, and Ubuntu in each one, which is, if that's what you're doing, it's unnecessary. All you gotta do is install different ones, and then you can log out, and at the login manager, for LightDM, which is login manager, you can change the desktop interface that you want to load up into, which is definitely necessary, because then you can spend so much time customizing, and that's going to be fun, but then you want to switch to something else. And fair warning, when you do something like that, it's going to install all of the dependencies, all of the default applications for that, and so you're going to be left with 6 different text editors, 6 different file browsers, which you can go through and delete them all, and then remap all of your default applications with update alternatives, which is pretty easy to do if you want to take the time to do it. And then you want to get sudo, Ubuntu Desktop. You can also strip down Ubuntu and just do OpenBox, which is a very simplified version, which is something if you want to run a very simple version of Ubuntu that's not going to drain your computer's power or your resources, I'd recommend that. As well as Kubuntu. If you guys have never used any of these, I also recommend it. Kubuntu is actually, you could argue, is one of the more easily customizable desktop operating systems because everything runs as a widget, essentially, so you can just add more widgets. And so you've probably, been working on this, you've been customizing your desktop, and you've probably completely broken your desktop if you follow everything that I've told you to do. So that's why I give instructions here on how to reset your Ubuntu desktop. You just run through dconf, reset, compes, because Unity actually is essentially a compes plugin currently. I believe we're at 7 point something, it's going to change it, version 8. Set aside Unity, and then Unity cactac reset tech icons. And that'll reset everything back to the original settings. And if that doesn't work, Google is also your friend, obviously, for fixing things. Or you can find me and give my business card at the end of this, or just Google Philip Ballew, find me, and I could easily help you out as well. And so with that, are there any final thoughts or questions, complaints, praise and criticisms, anything?
I'm curious.
Yes.
What is the status of the HUD?
HUD, yeah, I can go into the HUD if you want. It's not something most people typically go with, so I don't always talk about it, but have any of you guys ever used the HUD? The HUD's another way to where you don't have to actually utilize your mouse. So you can just, instead of holding down Alt, you would tap Alt and you can type your command to load up. So if I type, we're trying to fix some of the files. So you can type the command that you want to do. So I could type lost, for instance, and it would do find a lost file. So, and that would open up and you can do things like that. The status of it is there's still some work to be done in my opinion, but I think that it is something that has a lot of configurability for the ability to not have to spend.
If I understand correct, it was introduced like a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
right?
and it works.
And
Yeah.
what happened since then? Is it still an active project? Or?
I believe it is. Yeah. Well, Ubuntu Desktop in and of itself is almost in like a maintenance mode, if you will, because they're not really adding very many new features right now because Ubuntu is pretty heavily involved in their mobile convergence platform, and so they're trying to get their phone platform up to the desktop.
Well, quite curious about the hub.
I can talk with you about it even later if you want. Yeah. Anything else? Any other? Good. Yeah.
Yeah, but the indicators, I was just trying to run the command and what should I see? So is it something on the top bar or what?
Yeah, the indicators are just going to be little things sticking out of the top bar. Nothing too special, but it's nice that it gives you a knowledge of what's going on. So I have, my keyboard layout up here, for instance. Yeah.
It didn't work for me, but I will ask you later.
Yeah, feel free. All right, anything else? Yeah.
What's going to happen in the future with the desktop?
Ultimately, we're working on a platform that can be we're doing convergence, which is a marketing term everyone tosses around. But we want to work on a way to where the desktop almost becomes mobile, to where the desktop becomes a platform that allows users to continue to have every single file they have here on their Ubuntu phone. As well as a big thing we're using with desktops is we're switching the package management system. Click packages, I'd look that up if I were you and look into it. It's a pretty interesting system we're making, which the packages don't necessarily run or install as root, I believe is how it works, which is good. I don't know, is there anything else? Any other questions? Yes?
What's the state of that replacement for X11? I've got
Near? Yeah, because they have Wayland and Mir and all that.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head, but it's coming along. I'll give you that. The main goal of that is so it works better with mobile platforms. How old is X? So, eventually everyone's trying to figure out some way to get it to continue on its way, find a new platform. So I'm not entirely sure, but something like that needs to be done. Alright, I think with that, probably wrap it up here so the next person can get in and talk then. Alright? Alright.